What is up, Mizzou fans? Welcome back to another video on my channel. My name is Josh Fan of ShowMeFootball.com, covering your Missouri Tigers. And today I invite you all to join me as I dive into the question of whether or not Missouri Tigers head coach Eli Drinkwitz will stay or leave Mizzou this offseason. All that and more right after this. Ladies and gentlemen, Missouri Tigers fans, welcome back into another Mizzou football related video here on the Show Me Football YouTube channel. Before we dive into this topic, I do kindly ask you all to please like, share, and subscribe so more Mizzou fans can find this. Hit that notification bell as well for future Mizzou content. But without further ado, let's get into today's video. I'm going to try my best to answer the question of whether or not Missouri Tigers head coach Eli Drinkwitz will leave Missouri in the offseason. Of course, guys, the coaching carousel is already absolutely insane in the college football world right now. We just got a huge opening as LSU has decided to fire head coach Brian Kelly. That was a massive opening, and yet another opening in which we're going to hear Missouri Tigers head coach Eli Drinkwitz's name a lot over the next couple of months. We've already heard Drink's name in a lot of head coaching vacancy conversations. Florida, Penn State, those are really the big threes: LSU, Florida, and Penn State. And I'm actually going to address each of those in this video and kind of what I think about those and the likelihood that Drink would take each of those jobs. But I'm going to break this up into segments. And the first thing that I really want to do is make the case for Eli Drinkwitz staying at Mizzou. All the reasons why, if Drink does end up staying, why I think that will be. And the first thing that everyone really talks about with this Missouri Tigers football job is that in this NIL era, in this new age of college football, a lot of the history of these programs has gone out the window. And historically, yeah, Missouri does not stack up to programs like Penn State, LSU, Florida, but with the amount of investment financially that Eli Drinkwitz has gotten since he's become the head coach of the Missouri Tigers, it has made this job a lot more attractive and a lot closer to some of those other top jobs in college football. Now, Missouri will still never quite be, an LSU or an Alabama or an Ohio State or a Michigan, but they're a lot closer to those schools than they've ever been before. And that's because Missouri has kind of embraced this new age and they've found an opportunity to go out and be competitive, use their resources. We know that Missouri has a lot of rich alumni. Drinkwitz mentioned this as soon as NIL started kicking in Missouri. There's a lot of Fortune 500 companies in the state of Missouri that can invest in Mizzou football, in Mizzou athletics. And Drinkwitz has done a great job fundraising and getting buy-in from the donors in the state of Missouri. And that's been one of the biggest reasons why I think he's been able to be successful at Missouri. And of course, there's been a lot of success on the field. Drinkwitz has won 30 games over the last 3 seasons. And of course, this season is still ongoing, but it's been an incredible run for the Missouri Tigers. And Drinkwitz has already done things here that have not been done in Missouri's program history. But Missouri has provided Drinkwitz with just about everything. And Moon Choi and the board of curators, they've really worked to give Drink just about anything he's asked for, starting with the indoor practice facility that was completed a couple of years ago. Drinkwitz wanted that. He said that was a big deal for his program, and Missouri made it happen. Drinkwitz wanted to enclose the stadium, and he got a big $250 million renovation that's now going on in the north end zone. That was Drinkwitz's project that he asked for. Missouri gave it to him. No questions asked. There were some rumors that Drinkwitz kind of butted heads with the previous athletic director, Desiree Reed-Francois, and the board of curators and Moon Choi, they basically stepped in and said, Drink's our guy. We have his back. And I think that was one of the biggest reasons for the split between DRF and the University of Missouri. They essentially chose Drink. Drink is their guy. They've had his back from day one. You guys know the story of when Drink was hired, right? How the board of curators stepped in and basically took over the coaching search from Jim Sturk because they didn't like the names that they had brought him. And then they basically went out and hired Drinkwitz themselves. And Missouri has been at the forefront of NIL. They've been able to get state laws changed in order to give Drinkwitz and the Tigers an advantage on the recruiting trail. And Drinkwitz has proven so far that Missouri is a place where if you utilize the resources, we've said for a long time, Mizzou is a sleeping giant of a football program for a lot of the reasons that I just said. You know, the Fortune 500 companies that are here, the rich alumni, the football tradition, you're an SEC school. Drinkwitz has proven in his time here that you can play in these big games. And not only play in these big games, but have a real chance to win them. The potential to win is there. Like Missouri is in these games going toe to toe with Alabama. They beat Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl a couple years ago. Yeah, it wasn't Ohio State's full team. It wasn't Missouri's full team either. That was a hard fought win. That was a big win over a marquee program. Now, Drinkwitz is still yet to prove that he can beat a top 10 team on his SEC schedule, and that's the next hurdle to clear. But guys, there's a lot of coaches out there that their records aren't good against top 10 teams. Once you get past the top 5 to 7 coaches in all of college football, most of them have losing records against top 10 teams. And that's not me making excuses for Drinkwitz. I'm just saying that, you know, if you're disappointed in the job Drinkwitz has done, let me tell you, Missouri's not just going to go out and find another Drinkwitz out on the open market, which is why I think it's extremely important for them to try and keep what they have. Now, again, if I'm Drinkwitz, everything I just said, those are all reasons to stay. Missouri has been with you every step of the way. They've given you the finances. You're one of the highest paid coaches in all of college football already. And most likely, if Drink does not leave this offseason, Missouri is going to give him a big raise, and he'll be even top 5, top 10 highest paid head coach in all of college football. He's already essentially in the top 10 of highest paid college coaches. But of course, there's going to be guys that pass him because other guys are going to get extended this offseason due to this big coaching carousel. But Missouri's going to do what it takes. They're going to match just about any offer that is thrown Drink's way. If Drinkwitz leaves, it will not be because of money, because Missouri could not afford to keep him. They're going to pony up the funds. I have no doubt about that. That's all they've done so far. There's nothing that Missouri has done that would indicate they're not going to have the money to keep Drinkwitz. That's what you have to do to be successful in this era. I think Missouri understands what they have to do to be successful in this era. They're not going to lose their coach due to money. If Drinkwitz is to leave the University of Missouri to steal from Gabe DeArmond over at Power Mizzou, it's going to be because he does not think he can win a championship here. He thinks it will be easier at one of those places. He thinks it'll be easier to get the talent. You know, NIL is really strong at Missouri, but you have NIL at Florida and you have a great location. You have NIL at LSU and you have a primary recruiting rounds, you know, right near the campus. Same thing at Florida. And there's a lot of kids that dream of playing for Florida and LSU. It's going to be easier to recruit to those places. And they have a stronger SEC tradition, more so than Missouri, right? But on the flip side, Florida, Penn State, LSU, those are all schools with very high expectations. And so when you're Eli Drinkwitz, you have to consider the fact that you're at a place right now where you've bought yourself a lot of time. You can win 8 games per year. And look, Missouri most likely is probably going to win 8 or 9 games this year again. And while that's kind of disappointing based on some of the expectations and the hopes that Missouri fans had, because of course, this was supposed to be a season in which Missouri was fighting for a playoff spot. They may very well fall short of the playoffs, which actually has implications on whether or not Eli Drinkwitz leaves. And I'll touch on that here in a second. But ultimately, guys, like 8, 9 wins, like that's not a bad season. Drinkwitz will never be in trouble. His seat will never be hot for winning 8 or 9 games. You win 8 or 9 games at LSU, they're not going to be happy. You win 8 or 9 games at Florida, they're not going to be happy. These places run through coaches, okay? They run through coaches because the expectations are sky high. Penn State, similar case there. Maybe not quite as volatile as LSU or Florida, but Penn State is another program. They have high expectations. They fired James Franklin because he couldn't win the big game. Drinkwitz is another coach that so far has not won the big game. If he goes to Penn State, does he think it's going to be any easier? Even though Missouri is already outspending Penn State for recruits. I mean, they have already created a Pennsylvania quarterback pipeline, just stealing highly rated kids from Pennsylvania with Penn State offers. I guess that kind of gives away what I was going to say about the Penn State job. But now I hinted at something earlier about how what happens the rest of the season implicates what Eli Drinkwitz could do at the end of this season. If Mizzou were to make the playoffs, then Drinkwitz becomes harder to hire for schools like Florida, Penn State, and LSU, because if you're preparing for a playoff run, like, you're going to be focused on that. You're not going to be taking interviews with the other schools. If Missouri's season is over after Thanksgiving, at the end of the season, that game against Arkansas wraps up and there's nothing else to play for after that besides whatever bowl game Missouri gets thrown into. But if Drinkwitz is leaving, he's not sticking around for a bowl game. Those other schools are going to be able to talk to Drink right away. And a lot of people may say, hey, if Drinkwitz is not in the playoff and the season does end that way, why would they still want Drinkwitz? Well, their opinion on Drinkwitz isn't going to change over a couple games difference. If they like Drinkwitz as a coach now, they're still going to like him by the end of this year. That's not going to change. And there's a lot of reasons why Drinkwitz is an appealing coach. Again, he's embraced this new age of college football. He's been at the forefront. He's very good at fundraising. He's an attractive personality. You love him if he's your head coach. You hate him if he's not. He's polarizing. He's got an ego. He's a college football head coach. And schools want that. They want a head coach that is the face of the program, that can be a good program CEO. And that's essentially what Drink has become for the University of Missouri. He's become a program CEO. He's the face of the program. He makes good coaching hires. He does the recruiting. He's created a really strong culture here at Missouri, a place that's been considered one that is hard to win at. So that's kind of the gist of the Missouri job, why Drinkwitz would stay if he does choose to stay. And I've already talked about some of the reasons why he may leave, but I want to get more specifically into each opening that Drinkwitz is being mentioned for the most. Now, before we get into that, I do want to take a chance to show you all a message from our partners on this channel. So before we continue, let's go ahead and check that out.
Injured in an accident? Hurt in a car wreck? Call Mike. At DM Law, every wrong must be made right. With over 50 years of combined legal experience and offices in Missouri, Kansas, Oklahoma, and Colorado, as well as millions of dollars recovered for their clients, DM Law has the in-depth knowledge and experience to take your personal injury case all the way through to trial. They also offer free consultations and work on a contingency fee basis, which means you don't pay unless they win your case. DM Law also offers a large support staff of investigators, case managers, medical record specialists, and more. When you choose their dedicated legal team, you can focus on recovery while they handle your case. When it comes to personal injury, they believe that every right deserves a fight. That's why they make it their mission to help their clients receive the compensation and justice they deserve. Remember, Mike's got this. The choice of a lawyer is an important one and should not be based solely on advertisements.
So there you guys have it. If you want to get the compensation that you deserve, definitely go check out my friends over at DM Law. The link will be down in the description. But with that out of the way, let's get back to the video topic. So I want to break down each opening and just kind of what I think about each of them, the potential fit with Eli Drinkwitz there, whether or not I think he'd actually leave for that opening. The first one that I want to start with is Florida. That is one that Drinkwitz has been mentioned for a long time now, dating back to last year when we all thought Billy Napier was going to get fired. Okay, he stuck around a little bit longer. Now he's been fired. Drinkwitz is still at the top of their list. I think he's probably second or third to maybe Lane Kiffin or Jed Fish or Alex Golish, if you want to throw one of those names in there. But I get the sense that Florida fans aren't really big fans of Drinkwitz, and I think Florida needs to make a hire that they can sell to the fan base next, because with the Billy Napier saga and the way that unfolded, I don't think they want a guy that is not a proven winner. And I know Drinkwitz is technically a proven winner at Missouri, but again, we talk about the record versus the top teams and how Florida, it's championship or bust there, even though maybe it shouldn't be. They're trying to win stuff. I don't know if they're going to like the Drinkwitz hire. And yeah, you have to consider that Missouri is a harder place to win, and what Drinkwitz has done is impressive. I'm not trying to downplay what Drinkwitz has done here at all. Not at all. I love Drinkwitz. I hope he remains the coach here. But Florida fans, they are a hostile bunch, and if they don't like you, they're going to make it known. Hell, they booed Billy Napier off the field after he won against Mississippi State. They booed him off the field. Like, that's just how insane the expectations are at Florida. I don't know if Drink will be able to cut it there. Now, Drink's got an ego, though, and I think that, makes him a fit for the Florida job. But, also Florida, like, they provide the opportunity to recruit elite level classes without even leaving the state. I think that has to be attractive if you're Drinkwitz. The location, of course, like I said, and Drinkwitz is a Southern guy. I think he would be fine moving to Florida. I don't think there's a lot of people that would complain about moving to Florida. Ultimately, though, I think Florida doesn't quite have the pull of an LSU or an Alabama or a Georgia. And they've ran through coaches a lot over the last decade. And at some point, if you're Florida, you have to look at yourself and say, okay, we keep firing coaches to be something different, to be more. Maybe we're not, though. And maybe we need to look ourselves in the mirror and say, why aren't these coaches succeeding here? Why do we keep having to fire coaches? That athletic department is a mess. I just don't know if I want to step into that situation if I'm Eli Drinkwitz. I think, if I am going to leave, I'm going to wait it out for a bigger job that is a little bit more of a stable situation. Then there's the Penn State opening. And this is one that I think Drinkwitz has always been an underrated fit for. Yeah, he's not really a cultural fit for the Big Ten or up there in Penn State. However, his brand of football, I think, would transition seamlessly at Penn State. And we already talked about how Drinkwitz is creating a recruiting pipeline in the state of Pennsylvania. He can recruit Pennsylvania well. Penn State fans are going to love that off the bat. But how does Eli Drinkwitz compare to what Penn State just fired in James Franklin? Again, another guy that cannot win the big game. That's why they fired him. They were tired of him not being able to win the big game. And then eventually he lost so many big games that he started to lose the games that he should win too. And now that's why he's gone. But I don't know if you can necessarily sell Drinkwitz as an upgrade over James Franklin. So I'm not so sure about that one. I think Drinkwitz will hear Penn State out, but ultimately that's one where I think Missouri is already ahead of Penn State financially when it comes to NIL. Penn State, I just don't see that being the job that Drinkwitz would leave for. Then there's LSU. LSU, similar to Florida in a lot of ways, where expectations are high. Drinkwitz may find comfort in his current situation at Missouri, and if he doesn't take that job if offered, then I think that has to be one of the biggest reasons. But LSU is a job that I think Drink would take. I think he would kind of be silly not to take it, if I'm being completely honest. I know I just laid out all the reasons that Drinkwitz should stay at Missouri, why, Missouri is a good situation for him. But man, these coaches, they want to be at the top and they want to build a legacy. You can do that at LSU. I mean, Brian Kelly was the first coach in a long time that got fired from LSU that didn't win a national championship. If Drinkwitz wants to win a championship, he can do it at LSU. You look at what he's doing at Missouri, I definitely think he could win at LSU. I think he'd be a good fit at LSU. Now, the question is, does LSU get down to Drinkwitz on their list? Because I think there's a handful of guys that are going to be ahead of Drinkwitz on their list. Lane Kiffin for sure. And Lane Kiffin, whether or not he goes to Florida or LSU, that's going to have a lot of effect on things. I think Joe Brady, the former LSU offensive coordinator or pass game coordinator, he's going to get a look as well. He's the current OC for the Buffalo Bills. I definitely think he'll get a look. I think he's probably ahead of Drinkwitz on any sort of list that LSU has prepared. So I don't know. I think this one's going to come down to whether or not LSU actually gets to offering Drinkwitz the job. But if he's offered the job, I do think he will take it. But that's just my personal opinion. Now, there's a couple more points that I want to hit on before I go ahead and wrap up this video. But another note that I wrote down is, does the season change Drink's thinking at all? I talked about how the results of this season makes it easier for these other schools to hire Drinkwitz if he's not in the playoff. But also, does the way this season go make Drinkwitz change his mind? Because Drink came into this year saying this is his most talented team ever, production over potential. This team has a real chance to win the league. And they're going to fall short of expectations, it looks like. They're going to have to run the table to make the playoff. It's not impossible, but, the season might very well be considered a disappointment. Does Drinkwitz look at this and go, man, like, this was our window, this last 2 to 3 year stretch. This was our window to make the playoff, and we just couldn't do it. Now, you can argue that some of that maybe was due to Drinkwitz's coaching, for sure. But again, Missouri is a hard place to win at. It was a hard place to win at when Drinkwitz first took the job. He's done a great job to this point. He's got them in position to win these games. You know, we can sit here all day and debate why they haven't gotten over the hump yet, but the way that Drinkwitz looks at it is, man, I think I've maxed out here at Missouri. I'm just going to go to LSU because things are going to come easier for me there. So I think that's just a point to consider. I do. Now, what do I personally think Drink will do? If I had to put money on it, and I'll even give you percentage odds after this, but if I had to put money on it, I would say that Drinkwitz does stay at Missouri. Now, I think he's going to use these other openings to leverage himself for more money, for more NIL investment, even though he's already getting a lot. You know, you'd be silly to not utilize your position to say, hey, give me more, right? Especially if you want to win at Mizzou. Like if Drinkwitz does want to stay at Mizzou, hey, I would love to see him get even more investment so that he can go out and crush the portal. And I really hope that Drinkwitz stays. I do, because if you look around the SEC and the country, really, how many other job openings there are going to be? I mean, this coaching carousel has only just gotten started. You know, there's going to be a lot of ripple effects from whether or not Lane Kiffin takes a job, because then Ole Miss is going to be open. You know, you look at Mizzou's 2026 schedule, there's a really good chance that half their opponents next year have a first-year head coach. So if Drinkwitz were to stay at Missouri, he has a prime opportunity to raid some of these rosters in the portal and sell the program that he's built at Missouri to recruits in the portal and say, hey, we have stability. We're a high-level SEC program. Look at what we've done over the past few years. We're trying to get over the hump. We think you can help us. So I really hope Drink stays. But what do I personally think he will do? I do think he will stay, like I said. And I think he's going to get a raise. I think he'll get more investment. I think he really likes it in Columbia. I think he's really planted his roots here. I've listened to a lot of Drink interviews over the years, and I remember him talking on the Like a Farmer podcast, and he was discussing how he really likes it in Missouri because it's close enough to his hometown in Arkansas where his family can come to the games, but they don't have to live with the results every day. And he likes how his daughters have really made Missouri their home and how they kind of consider this their hometown now. Drinkwitz also mentioned when he was asked about the Penn State opening earlier this year, how, you know, you're on these lists, you're on these hot boards, but a few weeks later you could be on the hot seat. And that was a reference specifically to James Franklin and Penn State and how quickly things, you know, crashed and burned there. And I think Drinkwitz does recognize a lot of the fact that, you know, you can be at Missouri and you can slip up a couple times and, you know, they're still going to invest their time in you and they're still going to believe in you. You're going to get fired from those other jobs if that's what you end up doing there. And I do think Drinkwitz is going to consider that at the end of the year. Now, I'll tell you this. I'm at peace with whatever happens. Like, if Missouri loses Eli Drinkwitz, it's going to suck because I hate starting over. I think Drinkwitz has brought a very unique identity to the University of Missouri. You know what you're getting in this program. I think Drinkwitz has made Missouri a recognizable brand. You know, he's gotten them a lot of national attention that they just typically have not gotten. I love what he's built here, and it would be really hard to start over, to just bring in a whole new coach who's going to have to build his own culture, and he's going to have to win the fans over, and that might take a little bit. I just think it's a lot harder to start over. So I hope Missouri is able to hold on to Drinkwitz. But if he does leave, I think this job is infinitely more attractive than it was when Missouri was able to hire Drinkwitz. I think you're going to be looking at a lot of names that would be very interested in the Missouri job that could do a lot with the resources that Missouri has, and hell, even be an upgrade over Drinkwitz. Colin Klein, the offensive coordinator for Texas A&M, is a guy that I have in mind. John Summerall at Tulane. I like those guys as potential head coach candidates if Drinkwitz were to leave. That's just a hypothetical, obviously. But, you know, this job is in a much better position than when Drink took over. So that's something that I'm excited about if we do end up having to look for a head coach. Now, if there's one downside with all the openings that there's going to be, this isn't a good year to need a head coach because guess what? There's a lot of people online already. And there's jobs that are bigger than yours that are also looking for a head coach. So you're going to be a little bit further down the pecking order than you'd like to be when you're trying to conduct a head coaching search. So hopefully we don't run into that. I would like to see Missouri keep Drinkwitz. My money is on Drinkwitz staying and getting a big raise at some point over the next 6 months. But I want to hear from you guys down in the comments below. Do you think Eli Drinkwitz will stay at Missouri, or will he leave this offseason? Leave your reasoning down in the comments below, whether you agree with me, disagree with me. Definitely let me know. I'm curious to hear from you guys. But with all that being said, make sure you like, share, and subscribe so more Mizzou fans can find this. One more time, make sure you check out my work on showmefootball.com for more. And last but not least, follow the Twitter at showmefb. That's all I got for this one. I'll see you all in the next one. And as always, MIZ.